Hi everyone. Recently the question on how to hide a lookup control if the lookup control has no options available to it. So I've got my form here and I've got a standard title control going to a title column. I've got a static choice single with the Australian states. And then I have a lookup control going to a list of gardeners. Now gardeners is in a the root site, whereas this is a subsite, so I'll explain why that's important later. And it's then filtered by the states control, so it passes the states control back into, so when state in the gardeners list is equal to the control, it's going to filter out and find the gardeners for me. So if I come to preview, we select New South Wales, it finds Paul, Victoria finds Kelly and Ryan, Queensland has a few other extra people. Now Western Australia, no gardeners. So we don't really want to show gardeners in West, we don't want to show the gardeners option if Western Australia has no gardeners. So how would you go about doing that? Now you can't build a variable to say I don't know gardeners dot length or anything like that. So when we're looking at the variable, the gardeners is the selected value, not the choice collection. So so we don't know how many choices are in there. It's only what choice the person has selected. Now there is a trick to this, and I think this is what the customer has done. They have, I'm guessing they had done a lookup function. So we say check if there are any gardeners, and they can message me and let me know if I've guessed correctly. But I reckon they're doing a lookup function, and so the first thing you need is the name of the list. So you come to here and you go, well, the name of the list is gardeners. And then you need the column you want to filter on. So you're going to say state, yep, state. And then we want to, what value are we passing in? What field are we matching on? So it's the state control that we've got on our form. And then finally, what do we want back? Title would be fine. It's just anything. We're just checking to see if there are any gardeners in that state. Now, since it is this form is in a different subsite to where the data is, I need to actually put the relative path to this list, and you can do that. So you can put in quotation marks where the data is. So if you come to here and you go lookup, you'll see it's got all these sort of so list name, filter column value, output column name, server relative array, server relative URL. Array separator is only if you were looking up to a multi-choice column. It's not getting the collection of options. So don't assume that that's what I'm doing. It's more around what this is going to do is going to do a lookup and get the first item, which where the state where the state on the form control matches any of these. So there's no Western Australia, so it's going to return 0. Whereas if I select Victoria, it's going to select Kelly first. So why is that important? Well, what we then want to do is we're going to say, well, we've got the first gardener, and we could do something like length. I'm guessing as to what this customer has done, but I'm pretty sure this is what they may have done. So what they're probably going to do is length, and they're going to give it an integer because the characters are only a full number. So we're going to count the number of characters in that first option. Now, if there's no gardeners in Western Australia, that length is going to be 0. So let's go ahead and create that. We're going to put a label just underneath gardeners here, and this probably might not make any sense to a lot of people. It's kind of a pretty full-on topic. Check to see if there's any gardeners. So we're going to insert that. So we come to states, we select New South Wales, and obviously it's counting the characters of the first person. So it's really all it's saying is, are there any options or not? Yes, I've found someone. Victoria, 15. Queensland, 13. So it's 13 characters in that name. You come to Western Australia, 0. So that's how we know there are no options in here. So it's using a lookup control, but you're also using a lookup function just to kind of get that validation. And then so what I assume this customer is then doing is in rules, they might say something like if no options, if I could type options, What you do is you say insert if, and you get your variable. Check if there are any gardeners is equal to 0. Then you'd say gardeners visible is no, else gardeners visible is yes. Create rule. Now you come here, and so you'll see that the gardeners has flicked out. Now, one way around that, actually, just as a side note, is you can actually hide visible no, and that'll stop that flickering. So if you come to preview again, now you don't see gardeners until the rules run, and then it'll actually make a decision whether it needs to show gardeners or not. So since you haven't made a selection, the gardeners choices are 0. I select New South Wales, and gardeners now appears. Victoria, Queensland, all good. So they're all coming back, and the moment you select Western Australia, it it hides the Western Australia or the gardeners option for Western Australia. Now we know our logic works. We can probably just get rid of our label and make it a little bit neater. So you can come to here and you can see New South Wales shows the gardeners, Western Australia, it doesn't show. Now the customer was saying that's all well and good and this works, assuming I've got their solution right. But they don't really want to have too many variables, and I can understand that. I've seen forms with hundreds, I think it was nearly 500 variables or more. I can't remember. It was a big form, and so sometimes you want something a bit more, a little bit less complicated, or just you're only using that variable once. So there is an option for you. What you can do is you can come through to here, and we'll grab that formula. Copy that. We'll just keep that there in case I get this wrong. We'll come to gardeners and we will say visible. So required no, read only no, visible. And rather than using the drop down yes or no, we select insert and we can paste our formula directly into there. Now, what it's doing here is length. So it's saying do a lookup to the gardeners and check if there are any gardeners in Western Australia, and then we check the length, and what the property is visible is either is it visible yes or no. So the formula has to be a yes or no response. So what we then need to do is, so length 0 is not going to help the yes no option of visibility. So what we need to say is if the condition is true, then it's visible. If it's not true, then it's not visible. So what we need to say is if it's not equal to 0, if you follow me here, this is getting complicated. If it's not equal to 0, then show it. So we need to say if length not equal to 0, then it's going to be true. But if it's equal to 0, then it's false. So let's go ahead and insert that and see if that actually works. What I'm going to do is delete this variable, and we're going to go up and delete our rules, so we know that it's no rules, no variables. It's just this this formula now. So we go to preview, and cool. So gardeners hasn't shown up, so we know something's working. Now we're going to select New South Wales, and now gardeners is showing up. Then I can select Western Australia, and gardeners disappears again. So no variables, no rules, it's just in the config panel just for that condition. So as I said before, required, visible, and read-only only need a yes/no response to your function. And what we're doing here is we're doing a bit of a cheeky, we're doing a lookup to say, hey, in that list of yours, if I give you the selection of Western Australia, can you go and check that list for any gardeners in Western Australia? And then we just get the first response back, and if there's any gardeners, it's going to be more than 0. But if there's no one in Western Australia for gardeners, it's going to return 0. And then what we're doing is we're saying, well, is that response equal to 0 or not? If it's not equal to 0, obviously you've got a gardener. If it is equal to 0, then we're going to hide that control. So that is a pretty complex solution, but it certainly keeps the need of variables down. So I hope that's useful to you. Hopefully someone can use this and find some of this information valuable. If you've got any other questions, you know where to find me. Cheers.